social angle of mind control. Social framing is quite similar to controlling the emotional state of your subject. This is because the seventh foundation of framing and adaptability always follows the same basic pattern. But before you are ready to learn how to do social framing correctly, you need a brief lesson on dark psychology to understand the great impact of the social world on the human mind. This was an experiment done back in the 1930s. These days, there is an organization called the American Psychological Association that controls the kinds of studies social scientists can do. Their main concern is making sure psychologists follow ethical guidelines. These are guidelines such as not lying to study participants for a long length of time, especially not without debriefing them after the fact. There are also more obvious ones, like not allowing them to hurt participants physically or traumatize them. But the APA is a pretty new organization, and they didn't arise immediately after the study of human behavior, psychology, started to be taken seriously. Nowadays, the rules on what psychologists can ethically put their study participants through are quite strict. Many of the studies in dark psychology are, therefore, from an era where these guidelines were not in place, when psychologists pretty much did whatever they could get away with. This 1930s study followed two groups of orphans, many of whom had speech disorders. One group of the orphans went to loving, supporting families. The other group, for the purposes of the experiment, went to families who were intentionally negative and abusive. The ethical concerns are obvious here, but while this was an awful thing to put children through, we can still learn from the experiment. The results teach us much about social psychology. The children who were put in supporting environments often saw fewer issues in their speech disorders, while the group that had the abusive environment had even worse speech disorder issues than the other group. This may seem obvious. You may think, of course, the kids in the abusive environment had more speech issues. But if this is how you view it, you may have to see it from a different point of view. It is common for people to see the results of psychology and think it seems like just common sense. But you have to remember that there is a difference between something seeming like common sense and it being tested scientifically and proven. This study took the idea that you might have assumed, and it proved it. There are a great number of things that people assume about psychology that are not true, so it is useful to look at specific studies like this one and see what is actually proved in experiments. You also have to think about it in terms of scope. Sure, you might expect that the children in the abusive environment didn't improve, but it went even further than that. They got worse than they were before. This shows the importance of social environments for human beings. The impact of a negative social environment for children was so great that these orphans got even worse with their speech disorders. From a neuroscience perspective, you could also say that the kids' brains changed significantly because of the negative social environment. Now, we are not telling you to be as negative towards your subject as these orphans' parents were. Even beyond the ethical concerns, this isn't going to be helpful for your emotional manipulation. Remember, the emotional control part of manipulation is not just to make them feel bad. It is a means to the end of mind control or behavior manipulation. The basic idea behind social framing is making the subject believe that the social environment is different than it is. You want the subject to believe that the social group they want to be part of is doing a certain behavior or adopting a certain belief. Our social standing is so important to us as humans that we will almost do anything to make it better. Of course, you have to be strategic about how you do your social framing. You need to make a claim about this social group's behaviors and beliefs that the subject will believe, and something they won't feel the need to fact check on. If they are suspicious enough of your claim that they will ask a lot of questions, you will have to change the claim you are going to make. Here's an example. You have the opportunity to tell the subject that this social group has your desired behavior at an event both of you go to. One of the most important things for you to do is make sure you bring up this social frame in passing. If you make it too obvious that you really want them to buy this, they are going to be suspicious. Start out having a normal, casual conversation with them. The first few topics you talk about should have nothing to do with the social frame you give them. This will assuage any potential suspicion they will have. But after you have the casual talk out of the way, you can bring up a topic that is somewhat related to your social frame. Maybe it relates to the social group the frame is about. This would be the easiest way to do it. Once this is done, you can casually bring up the social frame as if it naturally came into the conversation. Say it in a monotone voice that won't be questioned, as if you don't care about what they think about it at all. Then, let the conversation move on. If you bring it up with some other casual subjects and act like it doesn't matter to you, this will give your social frame a lot of credibilities. The way you succeed with social framing has all to do with the state control. If you act as it matters to you at all, the social frame will fail. The only way to make sure the subject doesn't question it is with an unwavering, placid attitude. You don't have to treat it like the end of the world if the subject questions the social frame, as long as they don't accuse you of lying, which shouldn't happen in the first place. You really need to make sure you make a claim about this social group that is believable. If they say something like, "I heard something else," then just move on and say you must have been mistaken. They won't think anything of it. This is definitely not what you want to happen, but this is adaptability coming into play in emotional manipulation yet again. How you succeed in your NLP is by playing by ear, adapting to new information as you get it, and not getting so bent out of shape when things don't go as planned. This may be the most important thing for you to learn from this chapter. Things will go wrong in your emotional manipulation. They will not go as planned. You still need to plan so you know what you're going to do, but you should also plan for your plan not to work exactly as you imagined it. This will keep your state control in check.